If there is one person who carries the most responsibility for leading Xerxes to wage war on Greeks, is one Mardonius. And he also carries the most responsibility for the defeat of the Persians by the Greeks. Mardonius was a son of Gobryas, and Gobryas was one of the seven conspirators who brought Darius to power. And when Darius became the king of Persia, Gobryas became, of course, one of the power brokers, if you may. And Gobryas ended up marrying sister of Darius, and that sister of Darius is the mother of Mardonius. So when Mardonius grew and was an adult, he had so many, he was someone who was privileged, you can say, and because of his closeness to Darius, he had things going for him. But as you will see, this guy was not gifted. It's only because he was close to power that he reached the level he reached. Otherwise, he was not a gifted person. And in fact, that's why he ended up hurting the monarchy than help them. So before the death of Darius, Mardonius was assigned to be a general of the army, and he was sent to Europe by Darius. And he went to Europe on an expedition, and he failed. He failed. He really failed. And in fact, after the failure, Darius was forced to take away his army and give it to someone else. And then Mardonius came back home. Not long after this, Darius dies, and his son Xerxes becomes the king. Now, Xerxes is Mardonius's cousin, and it's most likely that they grew up together, being cousins and being most likely they grew up together and they were very close. And so when Xerxes becomes the king, um, he brings Mardonius back to the palace as one of the people who advised him. And when Xerxes becomes a king, in fact, Xerxes is not interested in going to Greece. Completely, he wasn't. In fact, Xerxes, the moment he became the king, he was interested in going to Egypt. That's the place that he was so much interested. He wanted to go to Egypt and make Egypt part of his empire, and he liked Egypt somehow for some reason. It is Mardonius who advises him to go to Greece, and in fact, he manages to persuade Xerxes, even though almost everybody else, of course, people who were able to say their mind before Xerxes was against it. In fact, there is another guy, I'm forgetting his name, who was their uncle, I think, a brother of Darius, who told Xerxes it's a bad idea and don't listen to Mardonius, whatever he's telling you to do. It's not going to turn out well for you. But Xerxes listened to Mardonius, and they went to Europe. They went to fight the Greeks. And while in Europe, the war did not go their way. And in fact, uh, everybody, seems like most people in Persia, especially Susa, the capital, knew about Mardonius's inabilities to be an asset to the king, because when messages came to Susa that the Persians had been defeated at Salamis, Herodotus tells us most people put the blame on Mardonius. It's like they knew this. It's because of Mardonius that things have gone the way they've gone. And even Mardonius himself knew that it was him who had caused the Persians to go to Europe and to lose. Because when he realized that they were losing the war, he became fearful. He feared that once they go back to Persia, Xerxes was going to punish him. And he decided it was better for him to die in Europe than go and be punished in Persia. So he approached Xerxes with a suggestion that he should leave him behind with 300,000 soldiers to continue the mission, which was basically already lost. So, and Xerxes, it seems like, understood what was going on, and he told him, no problem, stay back and do whatever you can. And he'd stayed back. and he stayed back and he attempted to fight the Greeks again. And now, after Xerxes had left Europe and Mardonius has these 300,000 soldiers and he's trying to fight the Greeks again. In fact, he goes to Athens and the Athenians run away for a second time, I think that is, or that, at that time. He is advised by a certain tribe of Greeks, the Thebans, who are allies of the Persians, and they tell him, Mardonius, we don't think you are doing this the right way. We don't think you're going to be successful by using brute force against the Greeks. We advise you to set your base here in Thebes. These are different Thebes from the Thebes of Egypt. You set your base here, and we advise you, rather than use force, be a little bit more cunning, like start bribing the Greeks. And they told him, the Greeks are generally very corrupt people, the Greeks of that time. So it's like, and when you read that book, and indeed you realize the Greeks were people who could be bought, basically. Most of, not all of them, of course. So they tell him, you'll have better chances of succeeding if you just settle here and you start approaching specific leaders in specific city-states and bribing them so that they compromise their own governments, and then that way you can, it might take a while, but in the end you will end up to have conquered the Greeks. But if you go with the force the way you are doing right now, you're not going to succeed. But he didn't listen to them. And Herodotus, this is how Herodotus describes that. He says, a strong desire of taking Athens a second time possessed him, in part arising from his inborn stubbornness, in part from a wish to inform the king at Sardis by fire signals along the islands that he was master of the place. So he was stubborn, in addition to being someone who was, he was arrogant, but he wasn't wise. He often underestimated the opponent, which always came to destroy him. So he didn't listen to this advice from the Thebans, and he went ahead and decided to attack the Greeks, and he went first to the Athenians. And while before he went to the Athenians, he made another strategic mistake. He sent a guy by the name Alexander Amintas, who was from Macedonia, and he sent him to Athens, and he was trying to persuade the Athenians to join an alliance with the Persians to fight other Greeks. Now, looking at it now, it's thousands of years, of course, 2,500 years ago, and maybe there are other aspects we are missing, but still, it doesn't make sense how the Athenians were going to abandon the other Greeks who had come, in fact, to fight, to protect and defend them, and then just abandon them and join an alliance with the Persians. It doesn't make sense, and in fact, that approach failed, and then the Athenians joined with others, and they faced him at battle, and at the end of it, Mardonius died in Europe. Yeah.